The story starts with Natsume, who is chased by some monster in a forest. Two students, Atsushi Kitamoto and Satoru Nishimura, are walking on a dirt path at the edge of this forest until when Natsume jumps out suddenly. The two students recognize him, their classmate who had just moved to the countryside town they live in now. Natsume continues to run. From behind, a one-eyed monster ghost is still chasing him. Before he reaches the gates of the shrine, though, the ghost yokai catches Takashi by holding him against a tree. The ghost yokai asks him to give her name back. As Natsume struggles, another yokai, more human-like in form, appears. While the two yokai converse, Takashi kicks the yokai in the eye, making her release him. Natsume reaches the shrine while the yokai wails in pain. Natsume then trips on a rope, which is a seal that imprisoned a yokai. The terrifying sounds make Natsume to be cautious, but then the small shrine's door opens, and there is a cat inside. The cat approaches Natsume and is surprised that he didn't run in fear. Natsume reveals he's used to it. That is when the cat calls him Reiko, but then notices he's a man. The cat gives some insight into Reiko's past when he learns that Natsume is her grandson. The cat notes that she is very lonely and has the same powers as him. The cat then mentions something called the Book of Friends, and when Natsume believes he has it in his possession, the cat disappears. Natsume returns home and his mother worries about him. After she notices him looking pale and dirty, Natsume quickly assures her and returns to his room. He takes a deep breath, reminding himself that he will never tell his adoptive family about his power. Searching through his boxes, he finds the book the cat was talking about earlier. Just then, the cat reappears, asking Natsume to hand it over. Natsume gives the cat some watermelon slices and then asks for him to leave afterward. The cat refuses because he wants the book, and Natsume has released him so that he will be his bodyguard and has Natsume call him Maenko-sensei. That is when Maenko-sensei explains that the Book of Friends is a very powerful and dangerous object. In its pages, it contains numerous names of yokai Reiko had beaten in her games. Names are essentially the soul of a yokai, and if the names are destroyed, so will the yokai. A knock is heard, and Natsume innocently answers it. It's one of the yokai that was chasing him earlier. Natsume makes a run for it with the book in hand. Maenko-sensei follows him and directs him to hide in a bush. Maenko-sensei assumes Natsume has seen how dangerous the book is, and thus, he asks Natsume to give it to him. But to his surprise, he refuses and won't give him the reason. This annoys Maenko-sensei and reveals his true form, a massive white fox. He traps Natsume under his paw and demands he give him the Book of Friends to him. Natsume refuses and punches Maenko-sensei. Maenko-sensei releases him because the punch was so painful. Natsume then explains that this book is his grandmother's legacy and is only linked to her. Natsume then asks Maenko-sensei how to return the names. Maenko disagrees with the idea as it would be a waste, and it is very dangerous. Natsume says that it will be okay because Maenko will protect him. Natsume sees that it's his reasonability to return these names and promises Maenko that he can have the book once he dies. Sensei agrees and teaches him how to return the names. Maenko easily takes care of the human-like yokai, whereas Natsume successfully returns the ghost-like yokai, whose name is Hishigaki. Hishigaki's memories surge into the Natsume. This memory is how Hishigaki met Reiko. The starving yokai finds a bun left on a shrine and is about to take it when Reiko snatches it. Reiko says it doesn't taste that great and the ones from Manatsuji are much better. Reiko then approaches Hishigaki, who is shocked that a human could see her and wasn't scared. Reiko suggests a game that she wins. Hishigaki is then made to write her name on a paper, and since then, the yokai becomes her servant. Reiko explains that now that she's her servant, she'll need to come the moment she is called. Hishigaki was happy to have a friend, but waiting for so long made her angry and wanted her name back. Nevertheless, after her name was returned, all she wanted to know was that Reiko was okay and no longer in pain. Natsume comforts her, telling her that she is okay and lucky to have had Hishigaki as a friend. The next morning at school, Natsume is asked to sign a petition, because without a petition for many people, the event will be cancelled. Suddenly, Natsume sees a green yokai behind his friends. The yokai approaches Natsume and he quickly leaves. On the way, Natsume is stopped by the yokai. He thought Natsume was Reiko. The yokai then threatens to devour him if he doesn't give the Book of Friendship. Just then, Maenko-sensei appears and stops the yokai. He underestimates Maenko and advances to strike. However, Maenko-sensei is enraged and leaps upon the yokai. Natsume thanks Maenko-sensei and they go home together. Maenko-sensei explains why Natsume is being targeted by the yokai. Some of them want to control the other yokai, and the others want their names returned to the Book of Friendship. Natsume is tired of taking care of yokai who want their name returned into the Book of Friendship. Later that evening, Natsume and his family have dinner. Natsume thinks Maenko-sensei's presence is bothering his family because the cat is greedy and very spoiled. As Natsume enjoys his food, he sees a yokai standing next to his glass. The yokai wants his name returned to the Book of Friendship. The yokai is the do-god. Nyanko-sensei recognizes his tiny body. Do-god replies that he recognizes Nyanko-sensei due to his ugly shape. Finally, Natsume begins the ritual of returning the name. The do-god's name is stuck to another yokai's because Reiko used to drop her rice on it and made the pages stick to another. Natsume tries to pull the two papers apart. This causes the do-god to stretch and make weird movements. Natsume is reminded that if he ripped the two papers apart, it would cause great pain for the yokai. Natsume then asks the do-god to let it go, but the do-god insists on having his name returned. Natsume and Nyanko-sensei go to the Seventh Forest, where the do-god lives. On the way, Natsume bumps into an old lady and she drops a peach from her bag. Finally, they arrive at the do-god's place. The do-god explains he is not a real god, but a wandering yokai who lives in a small shrine. When his village experienced a drought, they asked a favor at the shrine until their prayers were answered and they started to worship the do-god. He used to be as tall as an average human, but now, due to the lack of devotees, he shrunk. Natsume offers him a peach, but it turns out the do-god has got a peach from Hana. The old lady earlier is Hana and is the only person who is still worshipping him. Natsume then explains about the stuck pages, but he doesn't know the other yokai's name on the other page. Surprisingly, the do-god recognizes the yokai. He draws the yokai known as the Shadow God. As he finishes drawing, Natsume and Nyanko-sensei look at the drawing and laugh as they find the ugly drawing. After that, Natsume, Nyanko-sensei, and the do-god look for the yokai on page 11, but after several days of searching, they fail to find him. They return to the do-god's shrine. There they meet Hana, who is worshipping the do-god. Hana sees Natsume and says she has worshipped the do-god since she was young, and she met the do-god once. The scene switches to the past when young Hana was praying while the do-god sat on the tree trunk. He was as tall as a human. Hana said she felt pity for the do-god because he was always lonely. Then, until Hana is getting older, she always comes to the do-god's shrine. Natsume keeps thinking about Hana until he gets talking in his sleep and Nyanko almost leaps on him. The next morning, Nyanko-sensei coaxes Natsume, attempting to get the Book of Friendship, but is coldly threatened by Natsume. Just then, the do-god appears, saying he has found the yokai on page 11. They immediately rush to the mountain. They plan to split up, but Nyanko-sensei feels a bad aura. Suddenly, a terrifying yokai appears. But it doesn't look different from the do-god's drawing, and the tiny yokai feels offended. Natsume then tries to reflect the sunlight, but the yokai has leaped on him. Suddenly, a flashback appears when Reiko challenges the yokai. It makes Natsume recognize the yokai's name, Suzuki. Natsume gets free with the help of Nyanko-sensei, and he begins the name-returning ritual of the two yokai. The do-god recalls the time he met Reiko. Reiko told him that the people wouldn't always come to give offerings. Reiko then gave him a peach, and the do-god said when you are loved, you won't forget them. Natsume suddenly collapses and falls from Nyanko's back. In the afternoon, Natsume and Nyanko-sensei go to the do-god's shrine. The do-god shrinks and lights spark from his tiny body. It turns out that Hana passed away. She had been sick for a long time, but she tried to give anything to the do-god's shrine. Because Hana is his last devotee, the do-god vanished. Natsume tries to prevent the do-god from vanishing, saying he will worship him, but the do-god scolds him and tells him that Natsume is his friend. Natsume looks at the small shrine and prays while giving the offerings. Nyanko-sensei takes the offering and Natsume chases after him. A flashback shows little Natsume under the slide. Suddenly, a girl comes as she realizes something. She notices that Natsume can see yokai. At school, Natsume is sleeping. His friend wakes him up saying there is a thief. As looks for the person, he has disappeared. That night, Natsume wakes up to find a yokai. Yawning, Natsume starts the name-returning ritual for the yokai. He complains that since he inherited the Book of Friendship, he has to return the yokai's names. He is different from his grandmother, who loved to take the yokai's name. Natsume is lying on the bed when suddenly, Nyanko-sensei comes home. Natsume scolds him because he is drunk. Nyanko states he brings a present, which turns out to be a toad, making him busy catching the toad. Later, Natsume releases the toad and beats Nyanko-sensei. The next morning, his mother says she is going to go grocery shopping. As she walks out of the house, two yokai appear and make his mother shiver. The two yokai enter the house and prostrate before Natsume, but are scolded by Nyanko-sensei. He notes that every time yokai comes for their names, the Book of Friendship gets thinner. However, the yokai don't want to have their names returned. Instead, they ask Natsume to be the exorcist. The exorcist disturbs their lives and is fond of showing off his power. They prostrate once again and beg for Natsume's help. Natsume states that it will be a problem when human eliminates the other human. Nyanko-sensei teases him and says that beating humans is his skill, but Natsume refuses. The next morning, Natsume is about to go out to school, but he finds the two yokai from yesterday are still waiting in front of his house. They beg Natsume to help them and they become his servant. They keep waiting for him, so he agrees to help them. As Natsume looks at the two yokai, someone also looks at them, giving him a sense that something is not right. The yokais come to see Natsume. Natsume gives in and comes to their shrine. The yokai explain that someone can use a blue spirit attack. They cannot get close to the area, but they smell a human. A flashback shows little Natsume meeting the girl and they realize they can see yokai. Suddenly, Natsume is surrounded by little yokai. Nyanko-sensei explains that spider yokai can absorb someone's brain. Natsume tries to calm them, but suddenly a powerful blue spirit flashes. Nyanko-sensei and Natsume get to climb a tree. However, they lose the blue spirit fighter. At school, Natsume meets the mysterious student again. It turns out he is Tanuma, a student in the other class. The next day, Natsume is looking for Tanuma in Yatsuhara. Their friends call Natsume and Tanuma are weird. Natsume suspects that Tanuma is the exorcist. Suddenly, the yokai appear. They got hit by the blue spirit attack and collapse. Suddenly, a giant yokai appears. The yokai remembers Reiko as he looks at Natsume. As usual, he asks Natsume to return his name. Nyanko-sensei explains that Natsume wants to beat a human, and the giant yokai Misuzu offers his help because he is bored of not serving after his name was taken. Misuzu thanks Natsume for releasing a toad, his devotee, which was caught by Nyanko-sensei. After that, Misuzu blasts off to kill the exorcist. Natsume tries to stop him as he is afraid that Tanuma will die. Nyanko-sensei tells Natsume to give a command to Misuzu. It turns out that as long as the yokai is in the Book of Friendship, they can be commanded. It is revealed that the exorcist is not Tanuma, but the bald monk. However, the monk cannot see the yokai, and he is Tanuma's father. They have just moved there. Tanuma is a sensitive person. He also gets sick easily and is influenced by supernatural beings. Therefore, the bald monk goes around to clean the area from the yokai. He explains his power is the Buddha's power, and because it is obtained through self-studying, he cannot see the yokai. Natsume tries to calm him down, and the monk hopes that Natsume and Tanuma can become close friends. On the way home, Natsume tells Nyanko-sensei that he is happy to see the yokai. At school, Natsume meets Tanuma, who turns out he can sense yokai's presence. They converse and get closer. At home, Natsume starts to get used to living with yokai. He thinks it is okay to listen to the yokai. In the street, Natsume encounters a weird-looking creature, later is called Kappa. The green yokai looks weak and he begs for water. Natsume stops and pours a bottle of water on his head. Unbeknownst to him, Sasada watches him secretly. At school, Sasada forces Natsume to take part in the Trial of Courage event, but he refuses. Sasada then tells him that the old school building will be torn down so that it is their last time to hold the event. Finally, Natsume comes to the old school building and Nyanko-sensei is coming along. The cat teases him, saying that he will need a bodyguard. His friend is suspicious of him as he sees Nyanko talking. Natsume then tells Nyanko to watch his behavior if he wants to come along. In the crowd, Sasada secretly watches Natsume. They get ready and begin to pick the drawing for their pair in the trial challenge event. Sasada appears and she tells them about the legend. Long ago, there was the god of fortune, but an evil merchant locked him so that he could get richer. The god of fortune then became an evil yokai. But later, he regretted it and had been wandering. The students have picked the drawing and Natsume is paired with Nishimura. While exploring the school building, they encounter a long-haired woman who turns out to be a yokai. They trip from the stairs and fall. Suddenly, an umbrella-head yokai appears and gets angry because the humans disturb him. Before the yokai attacks Natsume, Sasada arrives and the yokai disappears. Natsume finds Nishimura is missing and Sasada also lost her pair. Sasada scolds him and is suspicious of him. She states she will keep it secret as long as he tells her the truth. Moreover, Sasada wants Natsume to help her. Suddenly, Nyanko-sensei appears and beats Sasada. Later, the cat realizes Sasada is not a yokai. Natsume then takes care of the unconscious Sasada. Nyanko transforms into a girl and he feels comfortable with the figure. Sasada wakes up and is confused with the new girl. Natsume lies and says she is a member of the dodgeball club. Sasada tells them back then when she was in middle school she joined a trial challenge event. She lost her amulet and got a hard time finding it. Suddenly, an umbrella-head yokai appeared and greeted her. The yokai then returned her amulet with a branch of a tree. He said a nasty thing like him couldn't touch a holy thing. Since then, Sasada became curious about yokai and she started to study about them. He used to go to the trial challenge venue and wanted to tell the yokai that he was not nasty. She knows Natsume can see yokai, and she asks him to help her to thank him and tell him that he is not nasty. Suddenly, Natsume is pulled through the wall. It is revealed to be Nyanko-sensei. He tells Natsume that the head yokai in the building is in the Book of Friendship. Nyanko-sensei recognizes him as Shigeru. He then asks Natsume to escape, but Natsume is worried about his friends. Suddenly, Sasada appears and Nyanko-sensei transforms back to his girl form. Just then, the yokais appear and Sasada runs upstairs to see Shigeru to thank him, but they get attacked. Natsume then asks Nyanko to protect Sasada while he runs upstairs to meet Shigeru. Upstairs, the students have been unconscious. Shigeru gets mad at humans because they come to play around with the yokai. Shigeru is confused with Natsume, who is different from Reiko. Natsume can easily give command to him and the other yokai, but he offers to return Shigeru's name. However, the yokai, who has turned into a handsome man, states that his name is useless. Suddenly, Nyanko appears and attacks the yokai. Natsume then starts the name-returning ritual. He wants to return Shigeru's name because he is kind towards Sasada. Shigeru remembers when Sasada was looking for him. He felt annoyed with her, whom he thought was pretending to look good. Finally, Shigeru realizes that Sasada is a good girl and he leaves when Sasada arrives upstairs. Shigeru shines brightly and he touches Shigeru's head as a thank you. The next morning, Sasada goes to see Natsume. Natsume lies and tells her that the students are asleep instead of being attacked by Shigeru. Deep inside, Natsume believes Sasada felt Shigeru's touch. On the way, Natsume encounters a thirsty Kappa. As Natsume pours water on him, Sasada glances at him and smiles. In his room, Natsume opens Reiko's old stuff. That is when Natsume finds a library book she hasn't returned. He also finds an old train ticket to Kiriganuma. Curious, Natsume plans to go there tomorrow after school. The next day at school, Natsume is disturbed by Nishimura and Kinomoto, who are arguing about how to eat kitsune udon. They question Natsume if he should eat the noodles or the soup first. They keep arguing about what should go first. After school, Sasada meets Natsume. She tells him she wants to come with him as she is curious about yokai. Natsume wants to take the bus to the old station to Kiriganuma. Sasada insists on coming with him. As the bus stops, she is ready to get on the bus. Just then, Tanuma appears and tells her she dropped something. Sasada looks around to find her stuff but can't find any, and Natsume is already on the bus and departs. A moment later, Natsume arrives at the old station, which doesn't operate any longer. Reiko's ticket was bought at the station. Around the station, Natsume finds a furry yokai sleeping on the bench. Natsume and Nyanko walk toward the yokai and sit next to him. The yokai wakes up and thinks Natsume is Reiko. It turns out he has been waiting for Reiko all this time. Natsume then tells him Reiko passed away and he is her grandson. Natsume is informed that Reiko promised the yokai named Santo to accompany him to Kiriganuma to meet a yokai named Mikuri, who was mad at him. Natsume takes his book of friendship and returns Santo's name. He sees the flashback of what happened in Reiko and Santo's past. It is seen Santo is sitting on the same bench and he tells Reiko the yokai he likes Mikuri is mad at him. Reiko promises to accompany him to meet Mikuri in Kiriganuma. They will take the train to get there, but because it is already late afternoon, Reiko cannot accompany him that day and she promises will meet him and accompany him tomorrow. However, Reiko never comes back. Natsume then tells Santo that Reiko must have had a reason. He then promises to accompany him to meet Mikuri, much to Santo's delight. But because it is already late afternoon, Natsume decides to go tomorrow. Santo's expression turns blue in a sudden. Seeing Santo is feeling sad, Natsume decides to go right away. On the way, Nyanko asks Santo why he didn't go alone. Santo replies that he promised Reiko to go together. It's getting darker and the cold air blows. On the way, they are ambushed by a dark shadow. Nyanko quickly transforms into his huge form and takes them to run away from the shadow. He believes Mikuri has been possessed by the Earth Spirit due to holding anger and a grudge for a long time. A moment later, they arrive at Kiriganuma. There is a lake and a giant catfish appears and attacks them. It turns out the giant catfish is Mikuri, who has been possessed by Earth Spirits. She is enraged and catches Natsume. Furthermore, she is also looking for a book of friendship. Fortunately, Santo manages to get the book first and keeps it safe. Tenko then attacks Mikuri and defeats her. The giant fish returns to the lake and Mikuri is freed from the Earth Spirit. Shortly after, Mikuri in a small catfish form appears and scolds Santo. They then sit on the bench and it is revealed that Mikuri was mad at Santo because he gave his name to Reiko in the past. They keep arguing, but Nyanko and Natsume know they have made up. A moment later, Natsume falls unconscious. It is already dark when he wakes up in his room. Just then, several yokai from Futaba village come. One of them, Terusaru, asks Natsume to spare their names. Natsume accepts their will, but after he eats dinner. After that, Natsume releases one by one yokai. It drains his energy and he becomes weak. Terusaru thanks him and gives him a magic mirror. Through the mirror, Natsume sees that a yokai is attached on his body. It was the yokai that waved at him in front of the ruins that afternoon. Nyanko immediately tells the yokai to leave. The yokai tries to get on Natsume again, but is punched and breaks its mask. The yokai then apologizes to Natsume. Her name is Tsubeim and she doesn't have the intention to take the Book of Friendship. She only wants to meet someone and asks Natsume to help her. At first, Natsume doesn't answer her, but because Tsubeim follows him everywhere, he finally decides to help her. Tsubeim tells him she wants to meet a man named Taniozaki from Futaba. However, she doesn't have any clues about him except his name and his origin. Natsume and Tsubeim walk together. Tsubeim reveals she was a swallow and she lived with her siblings. One day their nest fell, and Taniozaki picked it up and returned the nest to the tree. However, their mother left them because she smelt human odor and her siblings died, leaving her alone. Later, she transformed into a yokai who could only hide in the bushes. Taniozaki used to give her food as he thought she was a puppy. Since then, Tsubeim wants to meet Taniozaki. The next day, Kitamoto informs Natsume that he has found Taniozaki's address. Natsume immediately heads to see Tsubeim and invites her to find Taniozaki. All the way, Tsubeim feels Taniozaki's aroma is getting stronger. It is already late afternoon when Tsubeim finally meets Taniozaki from his work. Tsubeim is very happy that she finally meets him after a long time. Later, Tsubeim thanks him for helping her. After school, Natsume and Tsubeim go to the top of a hill and wait for Taniozaki to pass by. Tsubeim gets excited every time she sees Taniozaki. Terusaru comes to meet Natsume and gives him his blood so that he doesn't get caught. Natsume joins the yokai race, but he lacks stamina compared to the yokai. Seeing his determination, Nyanko steps in and blasts off and helps Natsume win the race. After that, Natsume goes to meet Tsubeim, who is still sleeping. He wakes her up and gives her a yukata. He tells her that there will be a festival in the next village and Taniozaki will be there. Tsubeim puts on the dress and rushes to the festival. Since that night, Tsubeim has never come back to Natsume, and Futaba village has also been submerged in water because the rain has come, or maybe Tsubeim has returned to the village, or maybe she's gone to heaven. One afternoon, Natsume goes to meet Taniozaki and asks him if he met a girl in a blue yukata at the festival. Taniozaki confirms it and tells him they even took a picture together. Taniozaki shows the picture and Natsume is touched to see Tsubeim, who looks happy in the photo. In a forest, a little fox yokai finds a white hat left by a human. She is happy to find the hat and wants to show it to her mother, but she is sad that her mother has died. Meanwhile, Natsume is going to go on a study trip in the mountains area. Uncle Siguru asks him to bring a cup made by a ceramic craftsman not far from Natsume's study trip location. Thinking that he can help Uncle Siguru, Natsume is willing to do it. The next day, Natsume departs for the mountains area toward the ceramic craftsman's place with Nyanko. Meanwhile, in the forest, the little fox is bullied by several yokai that don't like her in the forest. Fortunately, Natsume appears and saves her. He beats the yokai, while Nyanko is sitting on a tree. Since that day, the little fox is curious about Natsume. She secretly follows him everywhere he goes. In the craftsman's place, the cup has not been done and will be ready tomorrow. Natsume and Nyanko go back to the inn empty-handed. The next day, they go to the craftsman's place again, but it suddenly rains hard and they cannot continue their journey. The little fox comes and gives them a broad leaf to shelter from the rain. Natsume thanks her and thinks the little fox is very helpful. The next morning, the little fox feels glad that she can help Natsume. He talks to her mom in front of her grave and states she wants to find mushrooms for Natsume. Not long after that, several yokai appear, and as they want to attack her, Natsume comes and saves her. After that, Natsume hears a loud voice calling out Reiko's name. Natsume then goes to look for the voice. It turns out to be a large tree yokai. The yokai is angry at Reiko because she promised to return his name, but Reiko never came. Natsume then starts to return his name and the yokai vanishes. The other yokai are afraid of Natsume because he has the Book of Friendship and leaves. The little fox approaches Natsume and she wants her name written in the Book of Friendship so that she is bonded to Natsume. However, Natsume declines and says that he wants to establish a bond in a different way. Later, Natsume takes the cup from the craftsman and his study trip ends that day. He and the other students leave the mountains. Meanwhile, the little fox wants to meet Natsume. She wants to show her hat to him, but she doesn't know where he is. Suddenly, a yokai appears and tells her he can help her to find Natsume if she gives him fish. The little fox is getting excited and she quickly goes to find fish. The yokai laughs at her silliness. He says that Natsume must have forgotten her. After that, he gives her a pill that can change her into a human. The little fox begins her journey to find Natsume, relying on her smell. She walks through village after village looking for his whereabouts. She thinks Natsume must be lonely just like her, so they have to be together until she finally arrives at Natsume's house. She sneaks into his house and sees Natsume eating with his adopted family. He looks happy and the little fox decides to leave. Even so, Natsume notices her presence and he rushes to look for her. The little fox is walking along the street in the afternoon. Because she's in a hurry, she trips and her hat is thrown and it rolls away. Fortunately, Natsume picks up the hat and helps her to stand. He says the hat is lovely and Natsume thanks her that she took a long journey to see him. Natsume promises that one day he will come and see her at her house. After that, Natsume takes the little fox to her home by bus. She sleeps all the way home because she is tired from the long journey. One afternoon, Natsume goes to a lake in the forest. There he sees a man named Akifumi. They want to see fireflies at night. However, Akifumi states that the fireflies seldom appear nowadays. That is when Natsume sees a yokai latched on the man's shoulder. To not want to intervene in someone's business, Natsume leaves the lake. On the way, a female yokai latched on Akifumi meets Natsume and asks him if he can see the yokai. Panic, Natsume runs away from the yokai. Unfortunately, he trips and falls into the ravine. Luckily, the yokai saved him. Natsume takes the yokai into his room. There, the yokai tells him that back then, Akifumi could see yokai, but one day he suddenly lost his skill and he couldn't see yokai anymore. However, Akifumi keeps going to the lake even though they cannot communicate with each other. Furthermore, the yokai says that Akifumi is going to marry someone and she wants to see Akifumi married and decides to disappear after that. Natsume is surprised to learn that the ability to see yokai can disappear. The yokai assume that Natsume will also lose the ability one day. Natsume asks her name, but the yokai says she doesn't have a name. That night, the yokai stays in his room and her body glows in the dark. However, Natsume feels her light is getting dimmer. That night, Natsume has a dream that he sees fireflies flying here and there and he suddenly hears a name, Kyo. When he wakes up, he decides to call the yokai Kyo. In the afternoon, Natsume and Nyanko-sensei go to the forest. Nyanko tells him there was a mountain god who had a relationship with a human in the past. The fireflies helped them and showed the way to the humans to meet the mountain god. As a thank you, the mountain god changed the fireflies into yokai, and many of them left the mountain. After that, it is said that a firefly in the forest is the descendant of the fireflies that were transformed into yokais. After that, they find Akifumi fishing in the lake. Suddenly, a big-mouthed yokai appears and approaches Akifumi. Natsume runs and lunges at Akifumi until he is away from the lake. Natsume apologizes to him and pretends to slip and leaves after that. Natsume doesn't tell Akifumi that he can see yokai. It's afraid that things get complicated. Nyanko explains the yokai in the lake earlier doesn't eat humans. Kyo tells Natsume that Akifumi was lonely and didn't have any friends. He used to cry alone by the lake. One night, Akifumi met Kyo with her body glowing and Kyo wanted to have a relationship with him. Akifumi told her he was not interested in yokai. However, Akifumi always came to the lake and they got closer and spent time together. One day, Akifumi couldn't see her anymore, but she always accompanied him even though he could neither see nor listen to her. The next afternoon, Natsume and Nyanko walk to the lake and find Akifumi fishing on the lake while Kyo resting her head on his shoulder. Natsume wonders why Akifumi always comes to the lake even though he cannot see Kyo any longer. That is when Natsume approaches him and says he can see yokai. Natsume sits next to Akifumi on a bench. Akifumi then tells him he feels miserable now that he is no longer able to see yokai. It is revealed that he loves Kyo that much and is brokenhearted and decided he won't marry anyone until he met a woman who accepts him wholeheartedly, and they will get married in 3 days. After that, Akifumi's fiancé comes to the lake. Akifumi bids goodbye and they leave. Next to Natsume, Kyo feels grateful that Akifumi finds the right one for him. Later that night, Natsume dreams of Akifumi who calls Kyo with the name Hotaru. In his dream, Akifumi panics as he cannot see Hotaru and Natsume wakes up and finds Kyo on top of him. He then calls her Hotaru and she states she wants to become a firefly so that Akifumi can see her again. Her body vanishes and she transforms into a firefly and she flies toward the lake. Nyanko then reminds Natsume that yokai in the lake doesn't eat humans but fireflies. Natsume and Nyanko rush to the lake and they find Hotaru in her firefly form. She was almost attacked by the big-mouth yokai. Natsume quickly jumps into the water and saves Hotaru. The firefly flies away and encounters Akifumi who is walking with his fiancé. Akifumi lets the firefly perch on his finger. Not long after that, the firefly flies away and at the same time, thousands of fireflies appear and fly around Akifumi and his fiancé. Natsume sits on a bridge and a firefly flies towards him as if it whispers something and flies away. Natsume believes it is Hotaru and she whispers something to him but he cannot understand. Sometime later, Natsume meets a young rising star named Natori Shuchi. He has a house lizard tattoo on his neck. Natsume also meets a masked yokai with its neck tied and its arm wrapped in a bandage. The bandage falls off and Natsume wants to help but he gets attacked by the yokai. Luckily, he manages to free himself. Just then, Natori comes to meet him. He knows that Natsume can see yokai just like himself. Moreover, Natori also has yokai who becomes his subordinate, Yurihime and Hayaraji. Natori feels happy to find someone like him and calls Natsume comrade. The next day, Natori visits Natsume's school and they go to a cafe after school. There, Natori asks Natsume to help his job as an exorcist. That time, Natsume notices the tattoo on his neck moving around. Natori then explains that it is a birthmark that can move around his body, and he has got the tattoo since he was a child. Later, they walk to Natori's house and Natori explains his work. He is currently working on a house with a yokai in the repository. The repository hadn't opened for a long time, and when he opened, he found a yokai who refused to leave. He thinks that yokai is troublesome, but Natsume disagrees with him. In the late afternoon, Natsume bids goodbye to him and Natori walks him to the forest area. That is when a giant yokai appears and aims for the Book of Friendship. Natori quickly defends Natsume and beats the yokai, but is stopped by Natsume. He comments that hurting yokai is not a good deed. It is not in line with Natori, who wants to exorcise the yokai. Natsume then leaves. On his way home, Natsume and Nyanko encounter the yokai whose neck is tied. Seeing its hand hurt, Natsume forces the yokai to put on the bandage. The yokai then tells him that she used to be a mountain guardian yokai, but a shaman took her and tied her up to keep the warehouse, and she was never able to leave the warehouse. She tried to untie the rope, but her hands got hurt. Back then, there was a kid who would see her like Natsume. The kid put on the bandage on her hands, but as time goes by, it is said that the kid has become an exorcist. Natsume realizes the kid she means is Natori. The yokai wants to meet the kid one more time and wants to be his servant. The next day, Natsume visits Natori and finds he is drawing a magic circle on the ground. Natsume tries to explain who his target is, but is held by Yurihime. The yokai comes and Natsume tries to warn her, but it is too late. The yokai steps into the magic circle and is affected by the magic. Natsume struggles and manages to free himself. He then jumps into the magic circle and gets hurt. Nyanko comes to help him, and moments later, Natsume, who is unconscious, regains his consciousness. Next to him, the yokai is still unconscious. Natori then recognizes the yokai as the yokai he met back then. He then comments that she has been free from the binding. It turns out that Natori intends to break the bond on her neck, and if he fails, he has to send the yokai to the afterlife. Fortunately, Natsume came and disturbed the ritual at the last minute, so that the neck strap came off without causing the yokai any further harm. Since that day on, the yokai has served Natori and is named Hairaji. Natori and his yokai leave the village and continue their journey. One afternoon, Natsume spots an umbrella falling from the sky, and there is a yokai named Akagayan behind the umbrella. Learning that Natsume can see yokai, Akagayan asks Natsume to give his body. Surprised, Natsume punches the yokai. Just then, a voice comes from a vessel he brings. It is Asaji. Nyanko is familiar with the name. In the forest of Isazuki, a noble yokai family lives there. They have a female yokai who is a talented koto player, and her name is Asaji. Akagayan and Asagi confirm that they are from Isazuki Forest. However, Asaji's body crumbled off and now only her soul remains. Thus, Akagayan wants to find a new body for her so that she can play koto for the last time. Asagi apologizes to Natsume for troubling him and she asks Akagayan to leave. That night, as Natsume sleeps, he sees Akagayan in his room at a glance. The next morning as he wakes up, he is surprised to find his hair turned blue, but it returns sometime later. As he walks to school, his friends are fascinated by his appearance, and they think Natsume is a girl. In the classroom, Akagayan appears and Natsume asks him what he has done to him. Akagayan admits that he planted Asaji's soul in his body. That's why Natsume can hear Asagi's voice in his head. Asagi apologizes to him that she couldn't stop Akagayan. Leaving with no option, Natsume agrees to help them. Akagayan says that if Asagi can play koto one more time, he promises she will leave Natsume's body. Later, Natsume and Akagayan begin to make a koto. Akagayan takes Natsume to a river, and they have to find a fish-formed yokai named Senbiki. Natsume wonders why they need a fish to make a koto, but he follows Akagayan. In the late afternoon, Natsume sleeps on the riverbank as he is exhausted. That is when Akagayan finds Senbiki. It turns out Senbiki has a long tread on its body that will be used to make koto. That night, Natsume dreams of his body crumbled off. He wakes up and finds Akagayan next to him. Akagayan explains Asagi is ill with a mysterious disease. One day, Asagi cannot play koto in front of the nobles any longer and her body began to dry up and crumble off. Thus, Akagayan determines to help Asagi so that she can play koto again. The next evening, the gate to Isazuki Forest opens and they have to finish the koto immediately. The next morning, they look for a bamboo tree that grows in a large fallen tree. After looking here and there, they finally find what they need. It is already dark when Akagayan finishes the koto for Asagi. Unfortunately, a giant yokai appears and kicks them away. Natsume falls into the ravine and faints. As he wakes up, he finds Akagayan has driven the yokai away. Akagayan then tells Natsume to go to Isazuki Forest, but Asagi inside Natsume refuses. She takes the koto and begins to play. She states that she doesn't want to play in front of the nobles. Instead, she wants to play koto in front of Akagane, who is loyal to her. The next day, Asagi returned to the vessel. Akagane and Asagi express their gratitude to Natsume for helping them. They part ways after that, and Natsume brings the koto home, but he cannot play it well. The next morning, Natsume encounters a dangerous yokai that is tied up on a tree. The yokai tries to reach Natsume and manages to grab his arm, but Natsume quickly escapes. Unfortunately, he feels pain in his arm and a red mark appears on his arm. Nyanko explains it is a curse. He recklessly touches the mark and he is cursed and his body turns smaller. He states that he cannot protect Natsume with his small body. Thus, Nyanko suggests that Natsume uses the Book of Friendship and summons a yokai, whose name is still in the book. They then walk outside and, guided by Nyanko, Natsume draws a magic circle. Natsume summons a yokai named Misezi and tells him about the red mark on his arm that is getting larger. Misuzu leaves to look for the other yokai that excels at curses. A female yokai named Hino appears. She checks his arm and explains it is a 5-day curse. She explains the yokai gave the curse couldn't go anywhere and left the curse to its victim to absorb his life in 5 days, and they need to find the yokai to break the curse. Unfortunately, Natsume forgets the way to the yokai. The next day, Natsume sees a black figure following him and is getting closer. Hino comes in the afternoon and tells him she has found the yokai. However, the yokai sent the shadow figure to attack Natsume. In 5 days, the creature will be getting more active and attack him. If he can avoid the shadow in 5 days, the curse will disappear. The days pass and Natsume feels disturbed even more by the shadow's presence. Finally, Natsume decides to fight him. Hino gives him a scroll and explains that if he can summon a follower with a light element, the shadow will disappear. One night, Natsume is getting worse. He is chased by the shadow in the forest. Cornered, Natsume takes out the scroll and summons a light creature. In one strike, the creature manages to defeat the shadow and the curse mark on his arm disappears. Several days later, Natsume and Taner go to the autumn festival preparation. There, they meet Sasada, who is going to open a food stall. They are asked to help her, but they run away. Fortunately, Nyanko is left behind and Sasada takes him hostage. Meanwhile, the little fox also comes to the festival preparation. She is chased by a yokai, but luckily, Natori comes and saves her. They get to know each other and Natori asks Haraji to watch the little fox as he has some business. Unfortunately, her human transformation pill fell off. The pouch containing the pill is found by a kid named Tamiko and is brought to Sasada's place. That night, the little fox finds her clutch in Sasada's stall and she tries to get it. However, Sasada chases her away as she thinks it is just a fox. Luckily, Natsume arrives and saves the little fox. He takes her to the forest, while Hiraji takes the pouch. Hiraji meets Natsume and the little fox. After consuming the pill, the little fox turns into a human. After that, Natsume and the little fox are roaming around the festival. They encounter Tanuma and they walk together. Natsume piggybacks the little fox who is exhausted and the little fox falls asleep on his back. They go to a cliff and watch fireworks in the sky. Nyanko arrives and watches the fireworks with them. This is the end of Natsume Yujinchou. Thank you, keep watching the content from this channel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest contents. See you in the next video.